Hello everyone. Today we have a special guest. Prof. Karen Adams is an academic loyal to University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I see all education you have received was in Ann Arbor at University of Michigan. So that's really interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Yes. And also, Prof. Adams is a director of graduate studies in the Department of English. Her interests are in the study of language and its social and linguistic context. She has authored and co-authored many articles in peer-reviewed journals. You have granted many awards for distinguished work in academia and outside academia as well. Also, most importantly, you have been my great mentor during my Fulbright scientific journey to Arizona State University. So I cannot ask for a better mentor. I had the best. I mean, you have a full profile. I would like to welcome you officially to my episode. I think we're going to have very, helpful and beneficial for the students. I'm really thrilled to have you today with me.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very nice introduction. And may I say, I was delighted to be your mentor. You were a wonderful Fulbrighter and certainly very interested in your work and in finding out more information about the topics that interest you and gathering wonderful data. So it was a real pleasure for me also to be able to participate in that opportunity with you. I was really happy to have that opportunity. So enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you so much for your words. Is it still hot there?
Yes.
Very hot. Okay.
Yes.
Also
very,
hot. So.
yes, very, very hot. And now it's humid.
Oh my gosh.
Because we have a monsoon season, and this is the monsoon season. So it doesn't rain, but it gets humid.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So let's get started on this episode. Yeah, we're gonna split it into two halves. Okay, so personal or academic and personal development. We're gonna start with academic. So we're gonna take you flashback to you being a student. How was it at that time, and how would you describe yourself as a student?
So we're talking about my graduate work.
Yeah, we can start with bachelor and go on.
Okay. So my bachelor's degree was actually an honors degree in political science. And so people may say, well, wow, how did she become a linguist? But I'd had, in my high school, I'd had some teachers who were interested in linguistics. One of them was a teacher from France who taught French to us, and he was very well trained in linguistics. And another was a literature specialist who was very interested in stylistics and had taken a lot of linguistics. And I'd also studied Russian in high school. So there was a lot of interest in language where I was. And I grew up in a suburb, a large metropolitan area that was very diverse. So there were a lot of interesting languages being spoken, including the fact that I spent my summers where there were indigenous communities. And so there were speakers of indigenous languages that surrounded where we were. So I grew up in this complex linguistic context. My dad was from the South. My mother was from Canada. So they had different accents, and I was just aware of differences. So even though I got my undergraduate degree in political science, I actually did research on things like language policy for that degree. And after I finished that degree, I decided not to continue in it, but I decided to go into linguistics for my graduate work. And so that's how I made the switch, because I realized in the discussions in political science, so much of what mattered was the way in which people discussed politics. That language was a very important shaper of how people responded to topics and understood topics. So I looked at things like language policy and the ways in which people presented themselves in different kinds of contexts, etc. I looked at lots of, mostly translated, but lots of translations of things. I spent a summer in a Russian studies and a tour to Russia looking at things. So it was just, even though my degree was in political science, I had a very strong sort of orientation towards linguistics, which is where I went.
I mean, it's from what you said, it's just very diverse as you described it at the beginning, and very strong background. So I guess you spoke, or you are speaking like Russian, French, and what more?
Yes, I'm one of those people that when I learn languages, but if I don't use them, I forget them. But, I've spoken.
No judge, the same here, so.
I'm still could be quite fluent in French if I spent some time there. And yes, Russian. I also took German and Spanish and Sanskrit and Vietnamese. So those were, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So let's move a little bit to the practical side of academic, environment. So it's common in the US that students study and work at the same time. Very common. Here, it's starting to be, acceptable, and sometimes because, they don't need to work here as much as in the States because they family cover everything. But I mean, my question is, do you think it's a good thing for the student, like in the bachelor degree, to work and study at the same time, or do you think it's a distraction?
Well, I don't know that I have an easy answer to that question. If the only way that a student can get an education is to work as well as study, then I would prefer they actually get an education doing that. But I don't. And some students, if what they're working on relates to some of their interests, then it can be something that's useful for them. But I do think overall it's better if students have the funding to be able to focus on their studies. I was lucky enough to have that opportunity both as an undergraduate and a graduate. So I will say that it certainly was a boon for me to be able to do different kinds of things. Apply for special grants to study Russian and travel in Russia, have an opportunity to go to Edinburgh University and meet people also from very diverse backgrounds. I mean, it was very lucky for me that my parents did that for me, as well as I was able to win grants, etc., to do a lot of that work. And so I would always say it's better if that can happen, but I wouldn't want people to think that that's the only way they can get an education. So sometimes students get internships and those can help them because the internship can be related to what they want to study. And so that can be a help also.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think it's right, better priority to focus on education if they can. This would be a better choice. Also, the same thinking, like about the major, how you think that a student, or, you know, they are just graduated from high school, they are still young in age, how can they decide that this is a good fit for me, this major is good, I can, you know, be something, I can do something? How can they decide?
Well, I don't know that I'm a very good example because I changed my field. So,
Yeah.
well, I changed it twice. I changed it as an undergraduate. I loved organic chemistry, but it turned out that there were many, when I was an undergraduate, many impediments that were put in front of women who were interested in chemistry. So I was not encouraged to continue, even though I was doing fine. And so that's when I switched and went into political science, where I also did history and continued studying language. And I don't think, um, and in all honesty, I said to myself, well, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be an artist anyway. So here I am, well beyond that time frame, still thinking about that opportunity. So I think it can be really hard for students. The most important thing, I think, is to take the opportunity to try some of the fields, you know, hopefully have a program that allows you some flexibility, that maybe allows you the opportunity to do internships, to try a field, and for a semester, you know, work with a program or a nonprofit or an agency that does the kinds of work that you think you're going to be interested in, and see what that's like, if that is available to people. But I think it's important, if you realize at some point that a particular field is not for you, I think it's important to find some way to change it,
Yeah,
because
I agree with you because I know most of the students, they start in something, then they switch to another major and they think that's, oh my God, I'm late, I'm behind my colleagues, they are in front of me. I mean, it's, if they think like that, I think it's, you know, will cause more problem to them. They should, you know, think about it as a good experience and not a waste of time. It's always a good experience to knowledge, you know, it's more knowledge better than, you know, nothing or little.
yes, and I agree with you about that.
Yeah,
Everything helps lead you to the place that you want to be.
yes.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, also double major is a common thing in the States. Um,
Mhm.
do you have, like in the American education system, like a single major policy, like all the way from bachelor, master, doctorate, all the same major, or is it like common people have double major, then focus on one of each, like in the graduates?
I think choosing some degree or some occupations that you want to participate in, such as if you want to be a doctor, for example, or if you, so you want to pursue a medical career, or you're very interested in certain kinds of engineering, for example, or in architecture, then there are certain things that you have to take, right? I mean, in order to move into those particular areas. So that will determine a lot of what you take. But certainly at Arizona State University, people do encourage students to think about bringing together different fields and finding sort of innovative approaches to different topics. And so there's a lot of, I think the advisors and both the faculty advisors and the advisors who assist students very early on in their careers about what classes to take, that their goal is really also to, one, help the student get through their program well, but also to encourage them to think about other opportunities if they really want and are interested in doing some other related kind of work. So we have, programs in the School of Art that are related to different kinds of engineering activities. So, I mean, it just depends, right? And so I think it's much more flexible now for students, certainly at where I teach, more so than it was when I was a graduate student and undergraduate student. But sometimes, as you say, you just need to decide that you have to spend some extra time so that you can go into a program that you think is really what you want to do.
Never too late to, to study or to learn.
Yeah.
So in the academic also field, I mean, we all face all the time challenges and, difficulties, hardships, and so on. As a student, how did you, if you faced one, I'm sure you faced many, how did you overcome it? And do you have like a specific strategy for tackling such a problem? Let's say, what was your turning point?
I did have some difficulties, clearly because when I was an undergraduate, there were still biases against having women in certain fields. So I often learned about it in retrospect. I didn't find out about the chemistry biases until several years later. And perhaps if I had just, thought, oh, I'm going to do organic chemistry regardless, perhaps I would have stayed with it. I did, when I moved into political science, which had always been an interest of mine, I did actually, there were very few women in the program I was in, when I didn't get an opportunity to go to one university for my junior year, one of my mentors told me that it was related to the fact that, the school itself, the other school was more prone to taking men than women. But I didn't let it stop me. I went to another institution, Edinburgh, which was wonderful. And I had a great experience. I just said, okay, if that school doesn't want me, I'll find one that does. And I did. So you have to be flexible sometimes, very flexible. And you also have to realize, context that if there are kind of biases in fields, you have to figure that out as best you can and, look for good mentors who will mentor you, and aren't concerned about your particular background. And that can be tricky, but those people are there if you look for them.
Yeah. So we can say it's flexibility, patience, and good mentor.
Yes. And always being willing to create other options should you need to. Don't be so disappointed that you just kind of shut yourself off from something. So,
Yeah, I agree with you.
yeah.
So let's finish this academic part with a happy story. What is your happiest moment in academia?
Oh, dear. Um, I don't even know what to say to that. Well, of course, getting my degree was a happy moment when I got my PhD. And it was fun for me because the person who was the dean that was handing out the degrees when I walked across the stage was actually, even though my degree was in linguistics, he had been my undergraduate mentor, and I'd worked on research projects when he was in political science. So there was and so he was the person that gave me my PhD in linguistics. So it was a very nice moment for me to see him. And it was a nice moment for him to see me finish. So we both enjoyed it.
I
Yeah. So it was,
imagine it's really
yeah, it was like the history of my career at Michigan all in one. So, and the person sitting next to me that said, "Oh, you really did do one of those obscure topics for your PhD," which I thought was kind of funny, but what's obscure? If you love it, you love it. So, yeah.
moving to the personal growth, which is the second part of the episode. I mean, personal development is always at all circumstances. It's required, and we should do it, all of us. I mean, for you, how you think about it, how you pursue development year after year on the personal level. What do you think? Like,
I think you have to be open to realizing that there are lessons to be learned from almost anyone. When I was an undergraduate, some of the people in my class, we would take classes together, that we were required to take, and some of them would say, "Oh, I'm not interested in this, I'm bored," whatever, and they just get up and leave the class, which was, in my mind, not a very good strategy. Certainly the faculty members would notice them doing that, but it was their way of handling things. But I realized at that time, I felt like I could learn from almost anyone if I paid attention to what they were saying, because everybody has such different experiences in their lives. They have such different kinds of knowledge. They have different kinds of ways of thinking about similar topics and thinking about different ways of approaching interactions with people. I mean, there's just so much to be learned if you listen. And so I just have always tried to keep myself open to thinking and hearing what other people are saying and asking myself whether or not that's something I need to consider. So,
yeah, I agree with you. So about self-development, I mean, usually people take a routine or, some books or certain, words that they, by some famous people, they heard it or read it somewhere and they, that it motivates them. So do you have any like kind of habits, things, routine that you stick to it and you think it's helping?
yes, I do think, I think there are a couple of things. One, for me, it was very good to have taken a year abroad and to have gone to a different institution, because there were very different expectations about what it meant to be a student. And so I remember when I was in Edinburgh, one of the faculty members said to me, "Oh, wow, it's interesting. You do all the reading. Most of the students we have from the States just read what's required." And I was like, "Oh, oh, what a terrible stereotype." you know. So, but I realized it was true. They handed me something to read and I read it because it was
Required or what?
really interesting to me.
Interesting.
Yeah. And like some of the things they gave me to read like a book by Isaiah Berlin on two concepts of liberty. Really made me think even more about how language really mattered. You know, radically different cultures could use a particular term and mean very, very different things by that term. And so it just, you know, fed my interest in language even more. So it's, I mean, I think it's just, yes, really critical to keep an open mind, not treat things as just something you have to do, but something that really could be quite interesting if you let yourself just get involved in it and think about it. I mean, you know, so yes, I mean, I just think that trying a different school, if you have the opportunity to do that, going to a different country, even if it's only for a year, all of those things I think really have a major influence on your attitudes and your experiences. So I think that that's really something, if you can afford it, um, that it's a great opportunity. Not everybody likes that. Some people don't like being away from
Yeah.
their home. But if you have any inclination, I would say try it out, see what happens. Yeah.
I
So,
mean, I agree with you. I mean, exchanging, whether cultural or academics or education, it's always a good thing to
yes.
explore, to meet the other, to know about the other person, the other, you know, whatever this other. So it's always a good thing, not to just be self-centered. I
Right.
mean, this is a huge problem if you just focus on one thing and oneself, yourself, and yeah. So, I mean, talking about self-development, that will lead us to success. I mean, if we do self-development, obviously we want to be successful. So,
Mhm.
what do you think? Is there any a shortcut for success? And if there is, what is it?
I think I maybe because I was a female, I don't know, maybe because for a variety of reasons, I was always rather shy, but I think it's really important to take the opportunities that you have to get to know people because often people feel the same way you do. And, you know, they may be shy or they may be hesitant to talk about themselves, or maybe they'll talk about themselves a lot just, you know, to kind of avoid other things. So it's, um, so yeah, I just, it can be, I think it's really important to engage as much as you can and take advantage of the opportunities you have. So if your educational institution is having a special conference and it interests you, well, you should try and find a way to attend it. Or if there's some small money available to, you know, purchase some additional materials, then you should think about that. You should look around and see what opportunities are available to you, and see what some of your colleagues are doing in order to expand their knowledge of their field and their experiences. It's I think, you know, opening yourself up to not worrying about whether not worrying about yourself so much, but thinking about it in terms of, oh, this is an interesting opportunity. Again, if I try this, maybe I'll learn something I don't know. So, you know, taking it on, even if it seems difficult. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, in our talking now, we are sending many messages to students. I mean, I hope they are listening very well because it's Fully, from an experience.
Yeah.
So let's say in challenging situations, such as a failing course, losing a job, or not completing a degree, what should one do? If you have like a scenario and a solution for it, a specific or just in general.
I think there are always going to be things that don't work out as we want them to. That's part of life. Circumstances change. I right now, in the western part of the United States, there are many fires that are going on, and people are losing their homes, etc. I mean, things that people never expected to have happen to them. So things change, things don't work. Um, and when I said I was upset when I couldn't, as an undergraduate student, go to the one university in London in the UK that I wanted to go to, I just applied someplace else. And it turned out that the place I did end up, Edinburgh University, was very appropriate for me. It turned out to be a wonderful experience. It turned out to have fascinating classes, not only in history and political science, but also in art history. And it was a wonderful place to travel from. And I got to have friends from all different parts, from different parts of Africa, for example. And so there's always, there's typically something good that can happen if you just allow yourself to shift and think, and find other options. If something's not working, I think that you really shouldn't stay with it for ages and ages and ages. You need to think about, how can I change this in order to have a better experience that works for me? So I think that, life is not unidirectional in that sense, that you have to be flexible, and it's to your benefit to be flexible and find other opportunities.
I
So,
cannot agree more. Yeah.
yeah.
So, do you attribute success to luck or hard work?
um, I think that hard work always matters and it's important. And while you're in the process, it may seem annoying, boring, tempting not to do it, etc. But I think that in my mind, nothing comes without work and focus. So, I mean, it's not that we don't get lucky, but I think that luck comes from our kind of creating a context in which that luck is possible for us. And that often happens by hard work. So,
Yeah.
and, yeah, and being, and just doing the hard work that you need to do.
Yeah, I agree. We need at certain, times in our life, I think all of us will face this very hard moment that
Yeah.
you're saying to yourself to be or not to be, like Shakespeare. So, I mean, it's going to be always a challenge somewhere. And it depends on the person if they take it as an easy challenge or a difficult challenge. It's reaction. So, how you react to this challenge, I believe.
Yeah.
So,
And difficult things become easier.
what is it?
Difficult things
Yeah,
become easier, right?
yeah. If you
Yeah.
beat the one, you can beat the others, the coming ones. I mean, it's a reminder. You always remind yourself of the positive things that you have been through and you overcome. I mean, motivation starts from inside.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from your experience, what advice you can give to students who start their, graduate study, like a master or PhD students? What advice?
I think my advice is to know as much as possible before going in to what the program is like, and to have a sense of what options are available to you in that program. It's very important to be realistic, because you're going to be spending time and energy, and which may impact and money, which may impact your family and your friends and yourself. So I think it's really important to just be realistic about what the programs are going to be like. When I was an undergraduate and I decided to apply to linguistics for my PhD, I actually had to make up what were called deficits, because I didn't have the undergraduate training all the training that they would have wanted. And I thought, oh, but I decided I would do it. I mean, and I just did it as quickly as I could. And it turned out that there were two different versions of one of the classes I had to make up. And there were because there were two different faculty teaching them. And one faculty was very interested in what we call field methods, and the other person was very interested in the theoretical history of linguistics. So I ended up sitting through both classes and only taking one for credit, because they were both so interesting. And, I got double the training and the one faculty member was perfectly happy to just have me sit in class. So I was like, oh, that's great. I just learned so much. I certainly got over those deficits much more quickly because of those kinds of opportunities. And a faculty member who was nice enough to say, oh yeah, sure, sit in. So
They always say the more the merrier. So I mean,
yeah,
even
right.
education, I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So in conclusion, we can conclude with a motivational thought that you have in mind, a word for students or anyone who listens to us and watch us.
Motivational quotes. Wow, I don't know that I'm very good at motivational quotes, but my father always used to say to me, if you make a mistake, accept that you've made the mistake. Go ahead if you need to and apologize to whoever you need to apologize to for your mistake. And then work your best not to do it again. But let it go and continue on. Don't get caught up in that, thinking, oh, I'm such a terrible person because I did that. That you can grow beyond it, and that you need to let it go once you've taken responsibility, so that you do grow beyond it. And not sort of get stuck, and all that time worrying about it once you've handled the immediate situation. So I always thought that was good to realize that you don't have to punish yourself all the time. You can do what you can do and then move on, and always just keep with the intent of doing better every time. So
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I got from your saying right now is, maybe to put it in other words, it's, we all worry, but I mean, we need to teach ourselves to not to worry, or to worry less, and to let it go more in life. We need many things in life to let go. And most importantly, we need to be kind to ourselves, even if we make mistakes, if we fail, if we I mean, whatever obstacles we face, I mean, it's just human. We are human. So it's expected.
Right. And even when people criticize you, you know, and rather than getting very, very upset, I think you can say to yourself, okay, I feel hurt by that criticism, but maybe some of it's appropriate. And is it? You know, if I do want to do better and be more successful, maybe that criticism can help me that way. So, and, you know, it can be very hard to let go of, you know, of something that hurts us or, you know, makes us feel bad about ourselves momentarily, but it's also a way of learning. So if we learn to hear what people are saying and understand that they may be saying it because they're trying to help us in some fashion, and you know, take advantage of that, and as you say, move on. So
Yeah.
as you can continue to learn. So
Yeah, I agree.
lessons. Yeah. Yeah.
I think this is the best conclusion to close this episode with what you have just said. Well, thank you so much for your time and effort with me to do this episode. It was a pleasure to have you today on my, podcast. I'm very, happy to see you again. And until the next time, for everyone else and for you, stay positive. And I hope you got the takeaway lessons from today's episode for the listeners. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for asking me. It was a joy to talk to you and your student. So, okay. And bye.